Let's turn back to The Voice now and the thumping loss to the Yes campaign. All 6 states voting no to Albanese's divisive, lazy, futile referendum. And today, Labor has a hell of a lot to answer for. Joining us to discuss this is Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Keith, great to see you. As always, you were one of those who were opposing The Voice right up front. We've already congratulated your colleague, Bridget McKenzie, and I congratulate you too, Keith Pitt. You fought all along against this insane idea. Congratulations to you. But what does it mean politically now for Labor?
Well, firstly, it's great to be with you. Secondly, I'm actually quite saddened. The fact that someone would look to divide the country intentionally, and that it's the nation's Prime Minister, it's federal Labor government, and basically a bunch of activists from capital cities, well, it just makes me sad. But secondly, I'm heartened by the fact that you can still stand for your convictions. You can actually stand up, put forward your proposition, you can make your case to the Australian people, and if they agree with you, they will go with you. And no one should underestimate that this was actually quite difficult. All of the research said 60% plus, they'll support yes, you can't possibly vote no. Well, the proposition was wrong. It was one that we didn't support. We're out on early, and here in my electorate, at the moment, we're the 3rd biggest no vote in the country, as are a lot of Queensland. And, mate, I'll just make one more quick point. I was in a pharmacist this morning, and I had a lady come over and said, "Are you Keith Pitt?" And I said, "Yes." And you usually know where this stuff's going. And she said, "Well, I suppose you're happy." And I said, "Well, same as I've just said, I'm actually quite saddened by the division in the nation." And she said, "Well, I'm a hardcore lefty, and I'm married to an Aboriginal man, and I couldn't bring myself to vote for this."
Wow.
And how about Labor just starts listening to the local people on the cashless debit card, on not getting rid of alcohol bans, on making sure we get kids to school? How about they listen to some of those voices?
Exactly, and Jacinta Price was, of course, at the front of those. Rita?
Well, we are seeing the no vote prevail, not only in Linda Burney's own seat, but a number of Labor ministers' seats. Energy Minister Chris Bowen, Education Minister Jason Clare, Tony Burke, Ed Husick, the list goes on. What does that say about the Labor Party being out of touch with their own voters? How could Linda Burney's own seat vote against this?
Well, I think it's just a demonstration, firstly, of their judgment, and secondly, that the mob will always work you out. I mean, it's a well-known fact. It's been around for a long time, and you can't pull the wool over their eyes. They desperately wanted detail. It wasn't provided. They want to know what difference it would make, and clearly it was none unless you lived in the cities and you were likely to be put on this thing and potentially paid who knows how much, because no one said. I mean, politically, I still don't know that this will have a direct impact on Labor's primary. I think the Australian people will sort of, dust their hands and say, well, we've dealt with that issue and let's get back to what really matters, and that's cost of living. We just can't afford to pay our bills. And I think if they're going to come unstuck at a federal level, Labor will come unstuck on that because they just keep driving prices up.
James?
Well, Keith, it's right to have a conversation about Labor and where they go with this. I know some people are saying that Albanese's leadership is in doubt. I'm with you. I think that people are going to move on from this reasonably quickly politically. But what about on the coalition side of things? Because, there were an awful lot of people on the coalition, including state national parties and others, who did not back in the no case and did, in many ways, certainly in New South Wales, an awful lot to stymie the no campaign. Does there have to be a reckoning within the parties of the centre-right in the coalition?
Oh, well, I think that's probably right. And that reckoning comes from the membership. It's why people are members of political parties. And in Queensland, I can only speak for the Queensland LNP, we're a democratic party. The members decide whether you get put up for pre-selection or not, and we get put forward every single time that we want to stand. And if the members decide that your judgment's incorrect, well, they'll move you on. And I think there's some potential for that for sure. But what a great thing for our democracy. People can have a different view and they can put it forward, and the Australian people work through it.
Well, I don't think you need to be sad. I think you should be jubilant that the Australian people faced up to this overwhelming campaign of bullying and guilt and misinformation from the Yes camp and said no. I think that is a triumph for everyday Australians. But I am interested in Andrew G. He resigned from the Nationals, sits now as an independent because he backed The Voice. his seat voted something like 70% no. So is there something wrong with our democracy when we've got someone sitting in Parliament not representing the party that got him elected and seemingly not representing the people in his own electorate?
Rita, don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely heartened for our democracy and the fact the Australian people won't be fooled. And I think in Calais, I think Andrew G's in more trouble than Flash Gordon. And I think they won't forget. And I'm confident Nats will probably continue to remind them of who made what decision
I think
where,
there's a much...
and he was elected.
But I'd have to disagree with both James and you, Keith. I think Anthony Albanese is politically dead man walking. I cannot see how you can be the Prime Minister who the first thing he did when he was elected, he said he was going to be doing this thing. It's his signature policy. He spent 18 months on this thing, Keith, while the Australian people have got poorer and poorer because of the lie he told about electricity bills. This government has no legitimacy. I can't believe the unions are going to sit there, or the Labor Party are going to sit there and back this guy through to the next election. As I say, I think he's politically dead man walking. He has nothing to offer the Australian people, and that is crystal clear. Keith, just very quickly before you go, so many Australians were too terrified to even, put on a no T-shirt or put a no poster up outside their sign. This is something we've never seen before in Australia. This was intimidation of the everyday Australians by the elites and by the left. The Nationals led the way, but, we've got to make sure this never happens again, Keith.
I agree. The only thing that'd be worse for Labor was if they're Rudd-Gillard Rudd again, so I think there's that. But secondly, it was my colleagues in the National Party, and there were a fairly small crew of us to start with.
Exactly.
That managed to till the ground, drove it forward. Myself, Jacinta Price, obviously, Barnaby, Lou O'Brien, Dave Gillespie, Col Boyce. We made a decision very early that this was a values-based decision. You don't split the country. Everyone gets an equal say in our democracy, and I'm absolutely heartened that the Australian people listen to that message. And I think it is a great day for democracy, even though I'm sad about the division that it's caused. And it's up to all of us now. We've got to put the place back together and get on with what needs to be done.
Fantastic. Keith Pitt, you were an absolute warrior throughout this, and you've spoken to us many times here on Outsiders. Thanks so much. It is a big day. Crack a few cold ones up there in Queensland for us and in your electorate as well. Thanks, mate.